talk if they want to. Talk don't bother me.
And welcome to Let 'em Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo.
And I'm Miss Joan Marie Musa.
And we're honored to have Alexa O'Brien with us, who's a journalist, an independent journalist and legal researcher, who's looking into the case of Bradley Manning, who you can see behind us on the screen. And she's leaving for Fort Meade, Maryland for, I guess, his trial. You'll tell us why you're going down there and what's happening. And of course, the relationship with WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, who sits right now in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, trying to fight extradition.
So welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, thanks for coming on a cold night.
Yeah. So let's begin by saying what's going on with Bradley. Is when's his trial start?
Well,
It seems to be taking forever. He's been in prison for 2 years, 3 years now?
that's right. He's been almost 900 days in pretrial confinement. He's currently at Fort Leavenworth. He was for 9 months at Quantico. Coming in December will be his Article 13 motion. We're in the motions phase. We're still in discovery.
So it's all pre-trial, right?
It's all pre-trial. That's right. The trial is scheduled for February. The government would like it to be in August of 2013. There's a chance, because of some discovery issues, especially that have just arisen in the last few sessions, that it might get pushed again. The judge is trying, it appears, to kind of keep it where it is in February, but we'll see what
And
happens.
how long of a trial do they anticipate? I mean, I know there's no telling, but
They have it scheduled for about 5 weeks. And
now why don't we go back and just say what he's charged with and everything? Because I think there's a really low awareness of this case.
There really is. In fact, during the first motion hearings, the press that actually was there, ABC, CBS, there was a CNN person, the ABC reporter was looking at pictures of George Clooney. You know, there were reporters shopping for shoes. So there is very little coverage of this particular trial.
And I want to take a moment just to place this interview in perspective, because today is election day, and right now polls are closing in many states and across America. People are coming out in a close-fought election, which is supposed to be one that represents two dynamically different candidates. Obama on one side, and I love that laugh, but I want to say that, and Mitt Romney on the other. So I want to relate both those men and to this case a little later in the discussion, since the election is going on right now. And of course, I also wanted to, this might not have to do with us, but I want to take notice of all those folks who are right now suffering because of Hurricane Sandy and the damage and destruction it caused in our neighborhood in Lower East Side, and in Rockaway and Staten Island, and the losses in Westchester County, and all those folks. And just say that we're with you, and we're going to be doing programming in the future. And I want to put out my shout out and thanks to all the folks with Occupy and Occupy Sandy who've been out there and really doing what FEMA should have been doing and what the federal government has not been doing. So Occupy came through, and thanks. You know, we're going to have some of you guys on here to tell us about what's going on out there right now. So with that said, well, President Obama he's the one who's pressing this, right? His administration is the one who's pressing this. And,
That's right.
And I also want to take a moment because we played this a while back. I played the video over the summer, Collateral Murder, right, is the name of the film. And Collateral Murder is one of the things that is alleged, I'm not saying he did or not, I don't know, alleged that Bradley Manning passed on to WikiLeaks, which is then went around the world. I don't know if folks have seen it. We played it on the air before. It shows an American helicopter machine gunning and murdering innocent people, children, and people who were...
Two Reuters journalists.
Yeah. And shooting right into a car full of children, desperately injuring people and killing them. So this video went around the world, and this is why our administration, current administration, Obama administration, is angry. Because this embarrassed America.
Let's let Alexa tell, what is he charged with? Because I think that's really the beginning.
Bradley Manning there are 22 charges against him, and they include aiding the enemy.
And he was a serviceman. He was in the Army.
That's right. He was a low-level Army
private, right?
He was a private. He became a specialist. He was demoted to private first class.
Oh, okay. Since the charges have been leveled.
Right before he was apprehended in Iraq. He has also been charged with Computer Fraud and Abuse Act charges. For him in particular, it's unauthorized access. It's very controversial charges because Bradley Manning had access. He didn't hack anything, allegedly hack anything. The government's theory is that because he saw State Department cables on his computer, accessed them, he's exceeded authorized access. But he had access. In fact, the link for the net-centric diplomacy database was handed out by Captain Stephen Lim, who was the officer in charge of the T-SCIF in Baghdad, the compartmentalized information facility that Manning worked in. And it was a link that was sent from headquarters to be passed out to all the analysts, no password needed. So it's something that the defense has tried to actually have them drop.
These are not secret. Well, he's not charged with releasing any top secret or even,
That's right.
or even classified.
That's right. And collateral murder isn't classified.
These are not classified. So, do you
so there aren't
Some
any
documents
issues.
are classified as secret.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's the lowest
the
level.
lowest
That's the lowest level. Others are confidential, and then some are not classified. Collateral murder isn't classified, and what's really provocative about the government's charges against him for collateral murder is they're going to have to prove in court that this is information related to the national defense, which should be interesting.
Well, obviously they'll say that it hurts people. People have a lower opinion of the United States, are less apt to cooperate with the United States, so it hurts us for people to know about my lie or anything else that happened, right, like that. There's a guy on trial right now for killing 13 people, right?
One of the sort of travesties of
In
this
Iraq or Afghanistan. Go ahead.
One of the travesties of this particular case is the lack of access for the press. There is no public docket. We don't get the court rulings. We don't even, what we get is we get defense filings, some of them, not all of them. We don't get any of the government filings. And it's hard to cover this trial beyond a superficial level. And
Now, what about people that are interested? Let's get like a website they can go to, because it seems like there's a huge amount of information, but people aren't accessing it.
That's right.
So let's give people right now, like, where could you go and find out more about this?
You can go to usvwikileaks.org.
U.S. versus, like V is
Yeah.
for versus, usvwikileaks.org.
Yes.
There's a massive timeline. What I've done is I've investigated the U.S. investigations of Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, and Manning.
I think a timeline sounds perfect, because that's the hard thing to keep, straight. Is like, when did this allegedly happen? Why is this against the law? Why isn't there more information about it?
Absolutely, and it's a massive whole of government investigation. This is the largest leak trial in U.S. history.
So is it a military tribunal, or is it a regular criminal case?
There's two aspects. There's the military prosecution of Bradley Manning. Then there's the Secretary of the Army investigation into his chain of command, which resulted in demotions and possible criminal charges. Then there's the grand jury that's investigating Julian Assange and 7 other civilians.
Now, I thought that the U.S. government and that Eric Holder has denied that there's an investigation of Julian Assange.
Eric Holder never denied that Eric Holder has confirmed that there's a U.S. investigation into Assange. And in fact, in the military motion hearing just last couple weeks ago, the government mirrored what the Department of Justice said in June of this year. The investigation is ongoing.
Can I ask one question? Because how is it that a foreign national who doesn't even come to the United States, who's never set foot in the United States as far as I know, can be arrested for violating American laws? How is it possible? Is it possible? Has it happened before?
We've declared worldwide war. I mean, the war on terror. I mean, so much of this particular case is wrapped up in the U.S. war on terror and the military-industrial complex control of the information environment.
Now, explain the connection between Bradley Manning and Julian Assange.
It's an alleged connection. Bradley Manning is alleged to have leaked the documents, the U.S. State Department cables that were published as Cablegate on WikiLeaks, a collateral murder.
So they're claiming he's giving this information to Julian Assange.
That's correct. To WikiLeaks and to Julian Assange. Yeah. And they're insinuating, although they don't have the forensic evidence, they are insinuating, and the government is, that there is some kind of connection, because they want to, first of all, they want Manning to plea out to get Assange. You know, Eric Holder certainly with the Department of Justice, but one of the more interesting parts of this particular trial and investigation is the role of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the role of the National Security Council at the president's level for coordinating this investigation that is with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So that's James Clapper, right? He runs, essentially administers the 16 agencies that make up the U.S. intelligence community. You know, in March of 2011, he said to, you know, Senate Armed Services Committee that WikiLeaks is a national security threat. It's a counterintelligence threat to him.
Now, how did the investigation go in terms of, they discovered that this information has been leaked because WikiLeaks publishes it. How did they trace that back to Bradley Manning? Like, where do they get this young soldier did this?
Are you trying to tell me, like, what's the government's theory?
Yes.
Well, there was alleged chat logs between, and this individual's actually played a very large part in the U.S. investigation. A gentleman named Adrian Lamo, who
And Bradley Manning.
Okay. Who turned him in. There's this alleged chat logs. He was working with the FBI and with Army counterintelligence.
Oh, it's a sting operation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you look at his testimony, I mean, the thing about Adrian Lamo is a controversial character because his testimony contradicts his public statements.
So he has credibility issues.
Credibility issues. He is. He was under the influence of drugs. He had just been released from a mental institution a couple weeks prior.
He's another one of these hacker flakes who is in this world of people on the internet chatting with each other. And unfortunately, maybe not thinking what he had done would be so serious to himself, allegedly anyway, Bradley Manning had conversations with this guy where he said allegedly incriminating things, which would then turn out against him. But the whole methodology...
Well, I think it's a little bit more than that because he presented himself as a journalist.
Yeah.
So he said everything that we talk about is, you know, source protected. Then he said he was a preacher. So if you look also at his testimony and his public statements and the chat logs, you can actually see that he was essentially working with the FBI to get...
To set someone up.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what sting operations are about.
Now, how does this relate to, because what impact does this have on the whole idea of whistleblowers? Because people have been saying that this is not a question of espionage. Nobody's releasing this information, selling this information. Nobody's even turning it over to a foreign policy.
Is there any allegation that he made money? Or?
He didn't, and even from an ideological point of view, he's not releasing information to another foreign country where he thinks has a better form of government than ours or what have you. He was basically a whistleblower releasing information. Now, what is this impact does this have on journalists who go to people for information and get that information to use to write stories in establishment media outlets like the New York Times, even Washington Post?
This trial is trailblazing in military law, and when you look at the National Defense Authorization Act and other insider threat, I mean, as a result of this trial and the U.S. investigation, we now have a National Security Staff Insider Task Force, which is headed by Eric Holder at the Department of Justice. So there's that paranoia happening within the military-industrial complex. But this trial in particular is trying to craft an Official Secrets Act, because what they want to do is they want to take the guilty mind out of the Espionage Act, bad intent, and just simply say that if I disclose to you as a journalist information, it doesn't matter if I'm uncovering war crimes, it doesn't matter, you know.
It's money. It has to do with
is.
$1,000 toilet seats and things like that.
It doesn't really matter. You are essentially become a spy, which, you know, Congress has been unable to pass an Official Secrets Act in the U.S., but this military prosecutor wants to. And I will say this, having watched the trial, having verbatim transcripts, this prosecutor has lied in open court.
Sure.
This prosecution has prevented defense from getting the discovery that he's entitled to. Actually, funny enough, people say, oh, well, he's in the military. You know, he has actually broader discovery rights in the military.
Oh, that's interesting.
So he actually gets Williams as well as Brady. So he gets anything that mitigates his punishment, or for the preparation of his defense.
That's what's happening now. Go ahead.
What kind of a defense does he have?
Yeah, that's what I want.
Does he have a team of lawyers from the military?
He's had a civilian counsel, David Coombs, who's also in the reserves military.
Okay.
Then he's been appointed military counsel. His military counsel has changed between the pretrial and the current. He has Captain Tuman, Major Hurley, and then there's David Coombs, and then there's a couple other assistants.
Who's paying for this?
He is. I mean, that's why it's important to donate money to the Bradley Manning Support Network.
Sure.
His defense fund in particular.
A defense like this could easily cost him $1 to $2 million, even more.
That's right.
And are people able to visit him?
He has a.
Actually, let's take back on that question. I want to get to that one, but tell us the history of how he was in prison and held for the last 2.5 years, coming up till now.
That's right. Interestingly enough, having done the timeline and looked very much in detail at the case.
Let me take a minute to say, Alexa O'Brien is a legal a scholar and a researcher who has been following the case of Bradley Manning and Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. This is election day. The people are going to the polls and voting right now. We're talking about this case, very important federal case that's happening. Let's go and start. Tell us a little bit about how this person who was really considered himself a whistleblower, who wanted to do things in a time-honored fashion in order to release the information of government duplicity, lies, murder, is being treated as a spy.
So has he made an admission that he released this information?
No, he hasn't.
Okay.
In fact, he has
It's
filed.
allegations.
He's filed his plea. We don't know what it is yet because it hasn't been revealed in court. At the last session, he did file a plea. There was a colloquy between the judge and him about counsel having submitted his plea. So it's in.
Are you expecting a not guilty plea?
I don't speculate.
You're not sure?
Yeah, I don't speculate in this particular case.
So going back to how he was held, he was arrested. Where was he taken?
He was
Back in 2010.
He was held in Kuwait for a couple of weeks, and then he was transferred to Quantico. And what's interesting is Quantico is a level 1 facility, so you don't normally. This is in the words of the commander of the brig now, where he's at Leavenworth.
Okay.
He was held there for 9 months. He was held at max prevention of injury. It included on several occasions him being stripped completely naked, having to stand at parade rest, to complete conditions that the special rapporteur for torture from the UN considered cruel and degrading, amounted to torture. What happened was, this is the interesting part, because Article 13 is coming up. If you look at this whole interagency investigation, there's the national security staff. They advise the president on national security threats, especially in the interagency process post 9/11. The primary advisor for military is the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It was McMullen. Currently, it's Dempsey. Dempsey has declared Manning guilty before trial.
Okay.
So has Obama. We have them on the record for declaring him guilty. Dempsey's deputy is a guy named Lieutenant General George Flynn. He sent an order down his chain to a guy named Colonel Robert Altman, who was the security battalion commander of Quantico, that Manning was to stay at maximum custody, prevention of injury watch, which included this bizarre, like stripping him and having to wear a smock and having to every 5 minutes, say, "I'm okay" to the guard, which is what you.
Claire Lebowitz is gonna. Well, we have her on, and we're gonna have her on and her group on, and this is pretty amazing. You'll see what it was like to be Bradley Manning back in those early days of his custody in Quantico.
And he was at that position, had that treatment, despite 3 forensic psychiatrists saying he does not need to be on this.
This is suicidal, right?
This is damaging to him, and his lawyers come out in court and the first day of the pretrial and said this is trying to get Manning to plea out to get Assange. That's why you're doing this to him.
Okay.
So now he's at April.
Why do they want to get Assange? Why is the focus really on Assange?
Because WikiLeaks is a national, in the mind of the military intelligence sector, WikiLeaks is a national security threat because it essentially, in their mind, the way that they rationalize it, it's a threat. I mean, it's corruption.
Well, using the word leaks might be getting on their nerves. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's probably like the initial thing they don't care for is the word leaks at all, because
Unless-
that implies that they have secret information that they're going to release.
That's unless it's an authorized leak by that's top secret, to sell Obama's presidency. Those kinds of leaks are
They're
okay
fine,
for the
right.
military intelligence complex.
I wanted to show American soldiers, certain American soldiers, going beyond their power and committing crimes, or non-secret, non-crucial emails at a government-to-government level that show, as, for example, the set of emails on Syria that were recently released, or the set of emails on Turkey which were released and caused great embarrassment and showed that the government of Turkey had been lying to its own people about its relationship with the United States. Even the content of the lie might be small, but nobody likes to think that their government's telling them dishonesty.
4.2 million contractors and U.S. government employees have access to the information, or had access to the information that Bradley Manning leaked.
Wow.
This
That's
is not
interesting.
This is not
the Rosenbergs.
It wasn't really tightly held information.
This is not the Rosenbergs. This is not the 1980s. There was a number of very serious Hansen from the FBI and people turning over people to be shot and things like that. This was not that. This is not the KGB.
This was embarrassing.
It was.
And in fact, if you look at the behavior of public officials calling WikiLeaks criminals, the White House said that. Press Secretary Gibbs, right out of the White House pulpit. Clinton has said that WikiLeaks stole the information. Bradley Manning's been declared guilty by the president and by the Joint Chiefs. I mean, this is completely irresponsible behavior.
If they got what they want, if they get what they want, as far as Assange, as far as Bradley Manning, could you ever have a Watergate again? Could you ever have two intrepid reporters for the Washington Post or any other outlet tracking down deep, dark government secrets to tell the people, that are not...
Oh, I see, because they're saying this is creating a situation where that becomes a crime.
Right.
To do investigative journalism.
Absolutely.
That's right. I mean, that's really what's under attack.
Serious investigative journalism that embarrasses
All right, let's
a
give
top
out the
official.
website again,
Yeah.
because people are going to be interested in this, and yet in half an hour we can only really scratch the surface. There's so much more information. So tell people that are interested, how do you find out more?
You can go to usvwikileaks.org.
Okay.
Certainly, if you're interested in Bradley Manning, you should go ahead and visit the Bradley Manning Support Network at bradleymanning.org.
Yeah. It's down now because of the flood that hit the Lower East Side,
But it'll be back.
it'll be back, so just, keep it in your bookmarks.
And then, of course, WikiLeaks.org also has a background to their UN talk, which they just recently did. Julian Assange was speaking at the UN, which has background on the case as well.
Now, are you following what's happening recently with Assange? He's still in the Ecuadorian embassy in England,
Yes.
in London. And how long has he been there now? Like a couple months?
And what's
Almost
it-
200 days.
200 days.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, it's probably 150 days.
150 days.
And what's his nationality?
He's Australian.
Okay.
Right, and so what's going to happen there? Is he just going to live? I mean, like the Hungarian cardinal who lived like 20 years,
Or like
during
the person
in
stuck
Hungary.
at an airport
right?
that's on the
Mincenski,
no-fly
cardinal,
list.
the guy who's on the no-fly list that
It's
couldn't get out of the
awful.
airport for days or weeks. I mean, this poor guy's living basically in an office.
That's right.
Although he gets Lady Gaga to visit him.
The question is why won't the Swedish government interview him in the embassy in the UK, or as his counsel has offered, in the Ecuadorian embassy in Sweden? Why won't they do that? It's very clear that the U.S. government is interested in him. I mean, if you even take outside the grand jury that has already been confirmed in the trial of Bradley Manning, the FBI file is 42,000 pages big. Manning's only a portion of that.
Wow.
He's only 8,000 pages. There are 7 civilians being investigated by the FBI, as per Special Agent Mark Mander. Even if you take outside that aspect of him being charged, clearly the U.S. government can hold him as a material witness against Manning.
Okay.
So I find this kind of complaint, I think it's incredibly admirable that he went into the embassy.
And at the embassy, the government of Ecuador gave him that, took
Absolutely.
that risk.
He's a
Could
great
cost them
symbol
millions.
for many of us that to not give in. Why should he trust the U.S. government? The U.S. government there's no reason for him to trust the U.S.
Well, they're
government.
going to incarcerate him
Absolutely.
immediately, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. He's got information they want, so as you said, even at the very least, they can hold him forever as a material witness and put him in front of a grand jury over and over again.
The fate of Manning and Assange is our fate. What happens to them will happen to us, not only individually, if we're journalists, but also society at large. Public information safeguards democracy. When the public isn't informed, it doesn't matter what your politician is saying.
Yep.
You're not going to have political reform in this country.
Interesting. All right, we have basically just a couple more minutes. So Alexa O'Brien, maybe you could sum up where we came from, what's happening. You're going to Fort Meade. What's happening in the next day or two with Bradley Manning down at Fort Meade, Maryland?
Speedy trial motion. It's bifurcated, so we're going to be dealing with government.
Bifurcated means
split up.
split up.
Yeah. So Colonel Kaufman, the special convening authority who gave 8 or 9 executable delays to the government, he's been obviously...
Executable means...
It's a military term, so they've kept delaying the trial, saying,
Right.
we need to get the original classification
Right.
authorities, and we need
when
to...
the military and execute go together.
We need to time this with the, apprehension of Assange,
Right.
whatever it is
Yeah.
that they were doing.
Sure.
So that's going to be tomorrow. And then the investigating officer, I wanted to say this,
Right.
a Justice Department prosecutor was assigned when the FBI joined his case.
Yes.
A Justice Department prosecutor was assigned as his investigating officer.
Oh, dear.
I mean, the corruption in this trial is just
So the
mind-blowing.
FBI would investigate for the defense.
And then you're wondering why he didn't allow any
Right.
FBI witnesses, because they're his, coworkers.
Right, this is...
Okay. So is Bradley getting any visitors right now?
I don't know. Counsel has been very protective of him for good reason. It's funny because the ABC reporter who was looking at pictures of George Clooney turned around one day. She's like, "How can I get an interview with Bradley Manning?" It was like...
That'd be a career maker. Okay, thank you very much for joining us and
Yeah, you're
putting
going to
some...
have to come back because this is too big to get through in half an hour.
I know.
I think we have to come back and do a part 2.
Okay.
Where we go into more detail of different aspects. But this is good. We've gotten it started at least.
Okay. USV, WikiLeaks.org.
.org.
Get more
check it
information.
out.
Do your homework. We'll be back next week. And I'm not going to tell you to go vote. I know everybody's telling you to go vote. After I heard this, I don't know about this voting business, all right? So we'll see you next week. We'll discuss who's the new president.